Hey guys, so don't tell NewJeans mama things are not looking good for her in the court of law, and neither is it looking good for the girls of NewJeans. We're going to go over the highlights of their recent court developments. Last week was NewJeans, this week was NewJeans mama, and both of them through their legal teams are throwing cookies around in court looking for a Hail Mary, but Mary ain't home. It's Cassandra.
Is something wrong?
Is something wrong?
And speaking of cookies, because if NewJeans mama is really upset, she may be running off to the mountains to cast a spell that she can't afford. So let's ask a cookie on the wall. Who's the one in most trouble of them all? It says, stop asking obvious questions. It's NewJeans mama and NewJeans. Jeez, these cookies are getting sassy these days. So you have to hand it to the court, the judges, for streamlining these legal cases because it looks like they see what's really going on here. NewJeans and NewJeans mama, their cases are entwined. One ruling in the NewJeans case, because the injunction came up faster, is going to have a knock-on effect onto NewJeans mama's case. And NewJeans mama's case was essentially 2 or 3 cases that they bundled together because it was essentially the same issue. And so it looks like the court is pretty clear on how it's going to go, especially since it did render a ruling on the injunction. And the injunction did not go in NewJeans' favor. They appealed, and then they appealed again and got rejected yet again by the appeals court. But that is having an effect on NewJeans' mama's situation. Now let's go over hers first because, when the money seems like it's gonna stop flowing, that's when things get real. And the question that the court is mulling over in NewJeans mama's case, which is essentially a case that HYBE started. HYBE sued NewJeans mama essentially to say, to confirm that we canceled her stock options essentially, and we want the court to confirm it. So they did this even before NewJeans mama could have complained about it. So in a way, they got ahead of the situation. Remember, they were doing all of this last year, and it's just taken up until now for all the hearings to happen. And so the third hearing happened this week, and it did not go in NewJeans mama's favor. So Hee-jin really wants to get her about $20 million. It's 27.8 billion won. With today's bad exchange rate, that might even be $19 million. But nonetheless, it is a lot of money, and it could pay off all of these lawyer bills that she's probably saying, let me put it on layaway. And so this amount could have been a lot larger, remember? It could have been over 100 billion won, which is about $75 million, had NewJeans mama just waited a little bit longer until 2025 outlined in her original plan, but she had to hightail it out of there. And even November, when she said okay, I want my stock options, give me my money. And then HYBE is saying oh, sorry, girl, we canceled that back in July, and we've already filed a lawsuit with the court to basically say yup, it's valid that you get nothing. So these stock options that Hee-jin got from HYBE was when she modified her agreement with Chairman Bang Si-hyuk. Originally, when she took out NewJeans from Source Music, remember, she plucked those girls out and she said that, oh, well, we paid off Source Music so to compensate them, but, not with her money. It was basically HYBE's money. Well, she got the girls for NewJeans into ADOR, and she had established ADOR as a legal entity in 2021, before the debut of NewJeans in 2022. And so in 2023 March, she renegotiated her contract from a business agreement into a shareholders agreement, because suddenly she's going to be a shareholder. She's going to have about 18% of the company. Her lackeys will have about like 1% each. And so it's like a total of 3 people like in her little world that is having about 20% of the company. And she demanded that she have this, and then she has this option where she is allowed to sell it to HYBE and force HYBE essentially to buy her out. And they would value it, because you're like, well, what is it worth? It's essentially 13 times the revenue of the past 2 years. The reason why she would have gotten a lot more money if she was able to just be a good person and not have had all these audits and then be kicked out of the company in 2025 is that she would have been able to get the value of the average of 2024 and 2023. Now, 2023, and especially March 2023, when she renegotiated her contract, that was when NewJeans was hot on fire. It's probably like the peak of this popularity in 2023. 2023 was a great year, a lot of revenue. 2022 was minus revenue because they hadn't gotten started until I believe later on in the year, and there were costs associated with starting the group. So 2022 was a negative year. So had you just waited, even with 2024 with the NewJeans girls just like working 6 months and then slashing the tires of the ADOR minivan for the last 6 months of 2024, she still would have had a lot more, but she had to get out of there. And even November, when she claimed that she left and she put in the paperwork to get her stock options in November, even that's way too late, according to HYBE, saying like, that ship sailed away in July of 2024. Your November 2024 has no merit. But why was HYBE allowed to cancel her shareholder agreement and her stock options back in July of 2024? Most likely, it will be confirmed by the court. But what are HYBE's arguments about, like, yeah, that's totally valid, because HYBE claims that NewJeans had violated their shareholder agreement. Remember, before it was a business agreement, then in March 2023, she's like, I want to own some of this company. So they revised it into a shareholder agreement, which actually has a lot of conditions that she don't mess things up, that she does not betray trust. And NewJeans side said like, well, the evidence that HYBE brought up is like private account talk messages and personal emails, and those are inadmissible. So she's kind of admitting that it's actually true, but you can't use that as evidence. She's telling HYBE they can't use Kakao Talks and emails as evidence, where she is blasting remember when she even tried to like blast Chairman Bang Si-hyuk about like, competing with aespa. Oh, you can crush aespa, right? She probably said, let me in there. I can crush aespa because I used to be at SM. And then he's probably just repeating like, but that was just a Kakao Talk. We don't know. But yet we don't know. She blasted it out in her press conference. She can use it as evidence, but she's trying to say that HYBE can't use this as evidence. Well, what had happened in court was that the HYBE legal team said that, it became impossible to work with somebody, NewJeans, who had broken trust, and so the contract was terminated in July. And in May 2024, the court, yes, granted an injunction to NewJeans, saying that according to her, same agreement, you can't fire her from ADOR because she didn't do anything bad against ADOR, but it's real obvious she did something bad against HYBE. Now, in a different situation where now it is really applicable of how she treated HYBE, that is grounds to cancel the shareholder agreement. Her messing up and sabotaging HYBE, not grounds to cancel her CEO status based on that. However, remember, HYBE found a workaround because they just basically put more people on the board of directors that would vote against her and then just said, yeah, we're having a management shift and we are taking her out of the CEO position, but she is still the main producer of NewJeans and she is also still on the board. So they didn't fire her in terms of having a connection to what she claimed was her top priority, was creating music with NewJeans and taking care of them as her mama, and all this other stuff was just, about money that she didn't supposedly care about. So HYBE also said that Hee-jin prioritized her own interests over NewJeans, and that a key part of this evidence is essentially all of the documentation that Hee-jin just spilled behind where she was going to steal NewJeans. Essentially, that's like worse than embezzlement. And they said that she planned and executed this. If she didn't, she can explain why our evidence is false. And they said that they are not publicly disclosing all of the evidence. We need, after all this is said and done, we need a debrief. We need this somehow brought out, because wouldn't we like to see the evidence? Now, Hee-jin says that, this shareholder agreement was never terminated, and definitely not in July, because we did the Tokyo Dome concert. I don't know where she's getting these weird answers. It doesn't make sense. It's like looking at a coloring book. And again, it doesn't make sense. She's saying that she was dismissed in August, so they're agreeing on that. And then she exercised her stock options in November, and NewJeans did not mention terminating their exclusive contract until November. How does NewJeans suddenly find its way into this argument? See, it doesn't make sense. And the kicker is that Hee-jin's legal team said that we've already thoroughly rebutted all of HYBE's claims in press statements. Yeah, that doesn't apply in court. You have to make the statements in court. Why can't you make the statements in court? Is it going to be perjury? Is it going to have some sort of other legal ramification? Is it going to open up to more discovery? And so that is very odd for them to say like, we've already talked about this in the media. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You could have said it, to your auntie over in Pyeongchang, and it wouldn't matter. It's the same thing. So it's not over, because there's going to be another hearing yet again, and HYBE requested one witness to testify. Hee-jin's side did not request any witnesses, and the next hearing is on September 11th. Remember, there was also that other announcement on September 11th. These girls love a day of destruction. HYBE also said in court that ADOR, or her salary, was 2.7 billion won. So about $2 million in salary, in yearly salary. And they said, despite all of that, she attempted to take NewJeans and harm ADOR's corporate value. Now, how much salary she made, in some ways, also is sort of like, what really does that have anything to do with this whole shareholder thing? But that, I think, is actually something that does sway the court and the judge. Because the money thing is so huge. It's sort of like, you were paid a lot of money. So you can't even argue that maybe you felt that you were underpaid and that was sort of like a breach of trust on your side. That would be no grounds. So there was nothing that ADOR and HYBE did that would breach trust from their side. But then they were seeing all sorts of wicked treachery, from which Jezebel Institute coming at them from her side once they started to see all the evidence. So this shareholders agreement is important because it stipulates mutual cooperation for the continuous growth of ADOR, establishes a duty of loyalty for Hee-jin, and in particular it said that no acts that could cause harm to ADOR and affiliated companies within the HYBE corporate group should be performed, and if such a contract is violated, it can be terminated. So in this instance, honey, if you harm the whole family or any part of the family outside of ADOR, then you can have consequences, and the consequence would be your shareholder agreement would be canceled, which basically means your stock options gone.
You're not entitled to any money.
That's not true.
Well, I'm telling you that you're not entitled to any money.
Now, it's not as if her ownership percentage of 18% is just snatched away from her. It's just that who's going to buy it? And the way that the shareholder agreement was worked in was that they can buy each share for about $5, or with the bad exchange rate, maybe like $3.50. And that totals to about 2.8 billion won, which is about $2 million, which is essentially the amount of money that she borrowed from Bang Si-hyuk to buy her initial 18% to begin with. So she'd be left with nothing.
We are done.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, yeah,
No.
you are.
No, I won't go. No.
The case is over.
I'm not going.
The case is over.
Actually, I never got to speak. I'm not going.
Okay, let's move on to the NewJeans hearing. This is a lot of billable paper clips because you might be thinking, wait, NewJeans just had a hearing. That was their hearing to confirm their contract validity, the main case. But remember, there was the injunction, which you might think like, well, didn't that already resolve? It did, but then they were able to appeal. And so this was the hearing where basically they got the hand by the judge saying that, no, we're not going to take your appeal up. It's done. You can't appeal. And so essentially they are confirming, the court is confirming the original decision for the injunction that was granted to ADOR, saying that like NewJeans, you cannot just run off and do whatever you want without consulting ADOR and getting their permission and working together and, essentially making money together. And so until there is a ruling on the main case about your contract, you can't be running off and doing things rogue. If you do, there's a 1 billion won, like almost like $750,000 fine for each time you do it per member. So usually when you appeal, you have to come up with something new. There has to be something that the original trial forgot or left out or didn't consider that would change the situation for the appeals. Otherwise, why would it be a different decision if the court has gone through all of the evidence and there's nothing new with it? And even with new stuff, they don't like to reverse the decision in the first court because that is all sorts of internal politics with the judges, getting mad at each other. Like, why'd you reverse my decision? Like you're messing up my promotion. So it takes a lot for something to get reversed. And so the court stated that it's difficult to see any reason to believe that the trust relationship between the parties in this exclusive contract was damaged, and one party cannot unilaterally terminate the exclusive contract based solely on subjective circumstances. So essentially, the main case, which is about the contract, they've already almost like given you the answer in advance in their response to the injunction. So it's like the same, in this case, like the same question of like whether you can cancel this contract on your own, NewJeans, or not. And they're basically saying like, you can't do that. So what would be so different in the main case? There might be some other surprises, there might be some other developments, but essentially, even in this injunction, which is almost like kind of the appetizer, they're saying that like you can't unilaterally get rid of this contract the way you did. Why? They said that, you know what, your reasons of like Jin leaving or getting fired and having a conflict with HYBE cannot be grounds for termination of your exclusive contract. The court literally did not accept any of the NewJeans arguments, and they even said like there's nothing new here. It was the same thing. Number one, the devaluation of NewJeans due to HYBE's practice of pushing out albums. not valid. 2. The producing vacuum following the dismissal of Hee-jin, not valid. The formation of negative public opinion about NewJeans due to HYBE and ADOR's retaliatory audit of former CEO Hee-jin, not valid. The ignore remarks made by supposedly some other girl group to Honey, not valid. And 5, the whole plagiarism thing, not valid. So they're basically saying like, none of this is valid. You guys have had no new information, and it's becoming extremely clear that the court and the judge is siding with HYBE and ADOR, and they have to fulfill this exclusive contract. So don't tell mama, because this is going to spill onto her case. And what we've seen, this is kind of weird. Like, if you go back now and look at like a lot of the statements that the members are making about Hee-jin, it's very odd when your Kpop idol is idolizing the NewJeans mama. That's really, really weird. However, if it happens, that's really, really planned, really, really orchestrated, really, really, really signs of the JIT. So at this point, I think we need a little bit of humility from the NewJeans girls and of course NewJeans mama, but the chances are very low on that. Even with the NewJeans parents, if one of the mom and dad pairings is willing to go so far as to emancipate the husband from the family. So I don't even think she got divorced yet. Like, you know, she's probably thinking like, we can take care of the divorce later. We need to like, I've never heard of like, you're emancipating a parent. I've heard of like a child filing to emancipate themselves from their parents, but I've never heard of a mama and a daughter emancipating out the father so that he won't have any legal decision-making power. So if that's even like the length they're willing to go, humility is completely off the table. All right, guys, what do you think? Put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.